I work Thanksgiving just to avoid the family who treats me like a walking wallet. Then my grandfather, an old man I barely knew, handed me a legal document at the checkout. "You never asked for a dime," he said. That night, my family flew in demanding I sell my house for my sister's debt. They didn't know I could freeze their funds. When the pen hit the paper, I said, "Fine, I'll freeze it." The room went silent. My name is Hazel Cooper. I am 29 years old, and I was spending Thanksgiving hiding in plain sight, bathed in the sickly sweet smell of the massive pumpkin pie display near the entrance. The Greenhaven market was aggressively cheerful, pumping instrumental carols through tinny speakers. But checkout lane 6 was my foxhole. The relentless, high-pitched beep of the scanner was the only rhythm I wanted. Beep, slide, beep, slide. This wasn't my career. My career was at Meridian Biosystems, analyzing cellular degradation patterns, a job that required a quiet mind and a steady hand. I was good at it, or at least I used to be, but I was currently on an extended voluntary leave, a polite corporate term for burning out so badly the fluorescent lights in the lab felt like they were physically screaming. I took this job at Greenhaven 2 months ago to pay the bills for my new, smaller apartment, the one I'd fled to, but mostly to feel the solid, uncomplicated reality of a box of cereal in my hand. Today, Thanksgiving, I had snatched the double-time shift. My mother, Ruth, had called it a tragedy that I wouldn't be at the house. For me, it was a tactical victory. Avoiding that dinner, avoiding the performance of happy, grateful daughter, was worth the price of scanning other people's happiness. My hands were numb, not from the November weather, but from the constant, humid draft rolling off the open-faced freezer aisle just behind me. Every time a customer grabbed a tub of ice cream or a frozen turkey, a wave of Arctic air hit the back of my neck. It was a specific kind of cold, the kind that sinks right into your bones and stays there. I rubbed my palms on my navy blue apron, trying to bring some friction back into the skin, but it was useless. Beep, a carton of heavy cream. Beep, a bag of fresh cranberries. Beep, a box of savory stuffing mix. The sound wasn't just a sound anymore. It was my heartbeat, the metronome of my avoidance. I scanned a large 20-pound turkey for a woman who looked frantic, her cart overflowing, her coat already half off. "Happy Thanksgiving," she chirped, not making eye contact, already digging in her purse for her wallet. "You too," I murmured. My fingers brushed the icy skin of the bird through the thin plastic. Cold, static, frozen solid. I sometimes wondered what it would be like to just freeze everything, not in a destructive way, but just as a pause. A complete stop to the noise, the expectations, the constant, draining need from everyone else, to just hit a button and let the silence settle like frost on a window pane. My phone buzzed in my back pocket, vibrating against my hip bone. I didn't need to look. I knew it was the squad, the family group chat my sister Brielle had created. It was the digital equivalent of the dinner table I was avoiding. A stage for her life and a bulletin board for my assigned chores. Another buzz, and another. While I waited for the frantic woman to wrestle with the credit card machine, it declined. She cursed. She tried another. I risked a glance. The screen lit up with a wall of text. Mom image. A massive, slightly burnt pumpkin pie. "It's out of the oven. Don't worry. Save the big slice for Brielle's kids. Brielle. OMG, Mom. It looks amazing. The boys are starving. Dad, did you get the sparkling cider they like? Dad, traffic is terrible, but we're bringing the good wine and the cider. Mom. Hazel. Honey, are you sure you won't come by after? We'll save you a plate. We miss you." I stared at that last message. We miss you. It was the standard script. It sounded warm, but I had learned to feel the chill underneath. It was a summons, not an invitation. I scrolled up, 10 photos of food, 25 messages about logistics, about who was bringing what, about my sister's kids' latest antics, about the boutique Brielle ran. Not one message, not from any of them. Asked Hazel. "Are you okay?" Not one asked Hazel. "What are you eating today?" They didn't miss me. They missed the idea of me at the table, the complete set. They missed the person who usually did the dishes without being asked, the one who listened to Brielle's endless business complaints for hours, the one who drove Mom to her appointments. They missed their utility. I silenced the phone and slid it back into my pocket. The woman's second card went through. I handed her the receipt. Beep. The next customer. A box of aluminum foil. The rush peaked around 2 p.m., a surge of people grabbing last-minute whipped cream and bottles of cheap wine. Then, a lull. The quiet felt loud, hollowed out, and then he walked into my lane. He was the opposite of the frantic shoppers. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace that seemed entirely out of place in a grocery store on a holiday. He was thin, wearing a dark wool coat that looked expensive but very old, and a gray fedora pulled low. He looked like a black-and-white photograph walking through a neon-lit world. His cart was strange. It wasn't full of Thanksgiving feast items. It was full of basics, but in bulk. 20 cans of green beans, 20 cans of corn, 10 large bags of rice, 10 jars of peanut butter, all stacked with an almost architectural precision. He pushed it to the belt, and the first thing I noticed were his eyes. They were bright, a startlingly clear blue, and they were looking right at me. Not at the register, not at his groceries, at me. He began placing the items on the belt himself, carefully, grouping them by type. "This is a lot of food," I said, trying to fill the silence, my voice sounding too loud. "It is," he said. His voice was gravelly, quiet, but carried easily. "It's for the shelter down on Elm. Their pantry ran low today." I nodded, scanning. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of the scanner felt intrusive next to his calm. He was buying hundreds of dollars worth of donation items on Thanksgiving Day, while everyone else was focused on their own tables. I felt a small, sharp pang of shame for my own cynicism. The total came to $452.16. He didn't pull out a credit card. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a simple, dark leather wallet, unfolding it to reveal a thick stack of cash. He counted out the bills. They were old notes, worn soft at the edges, mostly 20s and 50s. "Keep the change for the employee fund, if you have one," he said, pushing the pile toward me. It was more than enough. "Thank you, sir. We do." As I processed the transaction and the register drawer slammed open, he slid something else across the scanner bed. It wasn't another item. It was a folded piece of paper, thick like cardstock. It looked like a receipt from an expensive store, but it was tucked into a heavy, cream-colored slip. I looked at him, confused. "What's your name, young woman?" he asked. The question felt personal, too personal for Lane 6. It wasn't the usual, "Are you open here, Hazel?" I said. He tilted his head, just slightly. "Hazel. A good, strong name. And your family name?" I hesitated. The air felt suddenly very still. The smell of the pies, the sound of the music, it all faded. "It's Cooper." The name felt thick in my mouth. Cooper, the name of my father, and his father, the grandfather I'd never met. The one who, according to family legend, had disowned my father for being too soft, and had vanished into a world of old money and East Coast shadows. Harrison Cooper, a ghost story, used to explain why we weren't rich, why we always seemed to be scrambling while his name was carved onto university buildings. The old man's bright eyes didn't waver. He seemed to register the name, filing it away without comment. He looked down at the end of my lane, where I had already bagged his donations. I was meticulous. I always put the cans in the bottom, balanced the weight, double-bagged the heavy ones, and made sure the jars of peanut butter wouldn't tip. It was just efficiency. It was the part of my Meridian Biosystems brain I couldn't turn off. "You pack these bags well," he observed, his gaze moving from the bags back to my face. "Orderly, solid. You consider the weight and the structure." I shrugged, feeling awkward. "I just try to make sure nothing breaks, sir." "No," he said, and his voice was firm, but not unkind. "It's discipline. That's a rare thing. It can't be bought. Just then, a kid ran past and yanked open the glass door of the ice cream freezer directly behind my register, the one that had been chilling my spine all day. A thick, rolling cloud of mist and biting cold spilled out, enveloping my station. It was so cold it made my teeth ache. I flinched, turning my shoulder away from the blast, a shiver running straight up my back. The old man watched the cold air swirl around me. He looked at me, his expression unreadable, and asked the strangest question. "Tell me, Hazel Cooper, have you ever thought about freezing the things that are hurting you?" I stared at him. The question hung in the air, mixing with the smell of sanitizer and cinnamon. It was so bizarre, so specific to the feeling I'd had just minutes before, that I couldn't form a reply. Was he a philosopher? Was he senile? Before I could answer, he gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if I had answered. "You keep that," he said, motioning to the folded slip on the counter. "It might be useful." He turned and pushed his cart toward the exit. He didn't say Happy Thanksgiving. He just left, leaving behind the faint, clean scent of sandalwood and old wool, a stark contrast to the store's artificial pumpkin spice. I stood there for a moment, the strange question echoing in my head. Freezing the things that are hurting you. "Hazel," I snapped back. My manager, Dave, was waving me over from the customer service desk. He looked stressed, his bald head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Hey, Hazel, listen." He was already talking before I reached the desk. "Mark just called out. His kid is sick. I am completely drowning here. Can you stay? I know your shift is over at 4, but if you could just stay till closing at 8, it'll be double time and a half." I looked at the clock, 3:45 p.m. I thought about my empty apartment. I thought about the silence. I thought about the barrage of texts I would get if I went home. "Why aren't you here?" "Just come for dessert." "We saved you the burnt piece here." At least, I was needed for a purpose I understood. Here, I was just a pair of hands. "Yeah, Dave," I said, the familiar words of self-neglect tasting like ash. "Yeah, I can stay." "You're a lifesaver," he said, already turning away to bark orders at a stockboy. I walked back to lane 6. As always, I had chosen myself last. The next customer was already unloading a mountain of groceries. I took a deep breath, pushing the old man's strange visit aside, but my fingers brushed the thick paper he'd left. I picked it up. It wasn't a receipt. It was a heavyweight, cream-colored business card, attached to what looked like a validated parking stub, but the stub wasn't for a parking garage. It was stamped with an embossed seal, the ink a deep navy blue. I squinted to read the elegant, raised letters. Pinebridge Trust. My blood went cold, colder than the freezer draft. I'd seen that name before, on junk mail my mother always threw away. Muttering about his lawyers, I turned the card over. There was no logo, just 2 names printed in severe, elegant script. Elise Corcoran, Esco, Fiduciary Counsel, and below that, a name that made the floor drop out from under me. Harrison Cooper, Chairman, Harrison Cooper. It wasn't a ghost story. He wasn't a myth. He was the old man with the bright blue eyes and the sandalwood coat. He was the man who had just asked me about freezing things, my grandfather, my actual, living grandfather. And he had just handed me a legal document in a grocery store on Thanksgiving. My hands started to shake, not from the cold, but from a sudden, terrifying shift in the atmosphere. The beep of the scanner suddenly sounded like a warning siren. The card felt heavy in my apron pocket, a tangible weight that shifted the balance of my entire life. Harrison Cooper, my grandfather, the man in the fedora. The name on the envelope my mother always threw away, that name, Cooper, had defined my life, but in 2 very different ways. There was the ghost story of Harrison, the invisible patriarch, the source of some distant, mythical wealth we were never allowed to touch. And then there was my immediate family, my mother Ruth, my father Graham, and my older sister, Brielle. They weren't a ghost story. They were a crushing, immediate physical presence for the last 5 years. Saturday was not a day of rest. It was my second shift. My family lived and breathed by a single, unspoken commandment. Because Brielle has kids, Brielle was 32, 3 years older than me, and her two small sons were the shields she used to deflect all adult responsibility. And I, Hazel, the single, child-free daughter with the stable job at Meridian Biosystems, was the designated resource. The Saturday ritual was immutable. It began at 9 a.m. I would drive to the upscale market, not Greenhaven, but the one with the artisanal cheeses Brielle liked, and fill a cart with groceries. I paid for them. It was always easier to just pay than to listen to the agonizing debate over who owed what, which always ended with Mom saying, "Hazel, honey, can you just spot us? Brielle is putting every penny into her boutique." Then I would drive to their house, my car smelling of fresh bread and herbs. The smell of those afternoons was always the same garlic and rosemary from the chicken I was roasting, the lemon polish I used on their dining table. I cooked, I mediated toddler arguments, and I cleaned. My father, Graham, a man who had faded into a passive, gentle neutrality, would usually be watching golf. My mother, Ruth, would supervise from the kitchen island, scrolling through her iPad. "Hazel, you missed a spot by the stove," she'd say, not looking up. "And the boys need their kale smoothies. You know how they get." Brielle would be on her laptop at the table, networking for La Belle Brielle, her struggling online boutique. She sourced jewelry and scarves, took artful, blurry photos of them, and wondered why she wasn't a millionaire. "It's just so much easier when you do it." She'd murmur, tapping at her keyboard. "You're so organized. I have to manage the kids and the brand." Because Brielle has kids, the family mantra, it was the excuse for her financial messes, the reason she couldn't help my parents, and the justification for my indentured servitude. It was the armor she wore, and the chains I carried. My accomplishments were invisible. I remember, vividly, the Saturday I brought my own news. I had been working at Meridian for 2 years, running 16-hour simulations, sleeping in the lab. I'd finally gotten it a promotion to lead the K-Series cellular research project. It was a 6-figure salary, my name on the patent applications. It was everything. I waited until lunch, the chicken I'd roasted sitting perfectly carved on the platter. "I have some exciting news," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was officially promoted to division lead at Meridian. My father grunted. "Meridian, right, that's nice, dear." My mother smiled, a quick, dismissive flash of teeth. "Oh, wonderful. Honey, does that mean more hours? You already work so hard?" Before I could answer, Brielle let out a long, theatrical sigh that sucked all the air out of the room. "Well, my week has been an actual disaster." Instantly, all eyes snapped to her. My promotion evaporated. "My supplier," she declared, "sent the wrong shade of cashmere. It's oatmeal, not sand. My entire winter launch is ruined. I spent 4 hours trying to photograph it, and it just looks drab. It makes my models look sick." For the next 30 minutes, the entire table became a crisis room for Brielle's beige-colored problem. Mom suggested new lighting. Dad offered to build her a new backdrop. My promotion, my career, my entire professional life was less important than a box of incorrectly colored scarves. I just sat there, eating the chicken I had cooked, and felt myself disappear. The digital leash was shorter and tighter. The family group chat. The squad was my personal hell. It was never a place for connection. It was a dispatch center. "Mom, Hazel, your father's prescription is ready. Can you pick it up on your way home?" Brielle, "Ugh, the babysitter canceled." "Can you come over? I have a vital networking Zoom at 7. Dad. Hazel, the gutter is full of leaves again. I was not their daughter or their sister. I was their operations manager. Last spring, I had accrued 3 full weeks of paid vacation from Meridian. I was burnt out. I was planning a trip to the coast, a quiet cabin, just me and the sound of the ocean. I made the fatal mistake of mentioning my approved time off in the squad. The phone rang less than 60 seconds later. It was Brielle. her voice breathless. "Oh my God, you are an actual lifesaver," she began. "You will not believe this. My friend just offered me her +1 to the Desert Bloom Fashion Week in Nevada. It's the event for boutique owners. I couldn't figure out childcare on such short notice. But if you're already free..." My 3 weeks of vacation, my one chance to breathe, were spent at her house. I did not see the ocean. I saw the inside of a diaper pail, refereed arguments over building blocks, and made 3 meals a day plus snacks. I deep cleaned her kitchen grout while watching animated movies. When Brielle returned, glowing with a desert tan and carrying a bag of new inventory, she breezed into the kitchen where I was scrubbing marker off the floor. "You survived," she chirped. She tossed me a cheap, cactus-shaped keychain. "Thanks so much. The boys said you were fine." She never asked how my vacation was. She didn't need to. My time was not my time. It was just the family's reserve fuel tank. The cruelty wasn't in the demands themselves. It was in the soft, loving language they used to make them. It was the weaponized care. "Honey, you're just so much better at handling the pharmacy," Mom would say. "You just have more free time. Hazel, it's not a big deal for you to run these errands," Brielle would insist. It was a big deal. Every time I said yes, I was carving another piece out of myself. My 29th birthday, just before I left my old life, was the final cut. We were supposed to go to dinner at an Italian place I loved. My reservation was for 7 p.m. At 6:45, I was in my nice dress, waiting. At 7:15, a text. "Mom. Running late. Sweetie Brielle's youngest has a sniffle." At 8, I was still on my sofa. I ordered takeout. At 9:30, a photo appeared in The Squad. It was my mother, father, Brielle, and her 2 kids, all squeezed into the frame, grinning. In the center was a single slice of grocery store cheesecake with a bent candle in it. They were in their kitchen. The caption, from Mom, "Happy birthday. Hazel, we're celebrating you in spirit. Wish you were here." Heart emoji, cake emoji. They were 10 miles away. They hadn't been running late. They had just forgotten. They had replaced my actual presence with a social media performance of my memory. They tagged me in the photo, ate the cheesecake, and moved on. I stopped crying. I just went numb. 2 weeks later, I put in my notice for voluntary leave at Meridian, citing burnout. I signed a 1-year lease on a 1-bedroom at the Riverside Flats, 45 minutes across town, in a neighborhood they never visited. I moved my things in 1 weekend. By myself, I was trying to escape the loop, but the distance just made them change tactics. My mother, Ruth, discovered that heart emojis could soften any demand. My phone would light up, a barrage of pink and red. Heart flower, heart morning. My sweet daughter. "Just checking in. Hope you're resting. Just a quick list so I don't forget. Your father needs his new medication picked up. Brielle's patio furniture is still in our garage and she needs it for a party. And the car needs its inspection by the 15th. If you could handle those this week, it would be a huge help. Love you so much." Kiss emoji. It was a list of chores wrapped in a love letter. In the sterile quiet of my new apartment, I began to practice a new kind of discipline. It was harder than any lab protocol. I would see the text. I would feel the familiar, sickening lurch in my stomach, the cortisol spike, the internal scream of, "I have to fix it or they will be upset." And I would set the phone down, screen side down. I would make tea. I would read a book. I would wait 1 hour, then 2. I learned to let the buzzing stop. I learned to let them be upset. Learning to disappoint them, I realized, was the only way to stop destroying myself. Now, standing in lane 6 at the Greenhaven Market, the freezer draft chilling my back, that heavy cardstock in my hand felt like a key. Pine Bridge Trust. I remembered that name. I remembered those thick, cream-colored envelopes arriving at my parents' house. They were always addressed to me. Ms. Hazel Cooper. They'd been coming for years, maybe once or twice a year. I'd asked my mother about one when I was home from college. "What's this?" Ruth's face had tightened. a way it had when she was about to lie. She snatched the envelope from my hand. "It's junk mail, honey. Just legal spam. It's from your grandfather's people." She said your grandfather like it was a disease. "They're just trying to sell us insurance or something," she'd said, tearing the envelope cleanly in half and dropping it into the recycling bin. "He abandoned your father, Hazel. He doesn't get to clutter our mailbox." Junk mail. But the old man with the sandalwood scent, the man buying $400 worth of groceries for a homeless shelter on Thanksgiving, did not feel like a man who sent junk mail. A new, colder suspicion settled over me. This wasn't just casual neglect. This wasn't just favoritism. This was active. This was curated. My family hadn't just been using me as a resource. They had been isolating me. They had been intercepting my mail. They had been actively, systematically hiding me from Harrison Cooper and hiding him from me. I looked down at the card again. Elise Corcoran, Esquire, Fiduciary Counsel. I still had 3.5 hours left on my double time and a half shift. 3.5 hours of scanning pumpkin pies and bottles of wine. But the calculation in my head was no longer about my family's feelings. It was about what they had hidden. The moment I clocked out, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The shift dragged on. For an hour, my mind was a fog. The name Harrison Cooper echoing with every beep of the scanner. I was on autopilot. A machine for processing turkeys and canned yams. I said, "Happy Thanksgiving," until the words lost all meaning. The business card in my pocket felt like a block of dry ice, a cold, solid burn against my hip. I replayed the encounter, the question about freezing things, the sandalwood scent, the bright, analytical eyes, my grandfather. The store emptied as the afternoon bled into evening. The dinner rush was over. Now it was just the stragglers, the truly desperate, picking at the dregs. The pumpkin pie display looked ravaged. At 5:30, the automatic doors hissed open, letting in a swirl of cold, dark air. I didn't look up, expecting another customer clutching a single bottle of wine. But they stopped at my lane, lane 6. It was him, Harrison Cooper. His fedora was still pulled low, his dark wool coat buttoned to the neck. He looked as though the fluorescent lights of the Greenhaven market were an alien atmosphere. He was not alone. Standing just behind his right shoulder was another man, a man who was his perfect opposite, where Harrison was thin and old. This man was broad and solid, built like a wall. He wore an expensive modern black suit and stood with a stillness that was unnerving, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. His eyes, hidden behind dark sunglasses, swept the store once, cataloged everything, and then settled on nothing. He was carrying a thick, dark leather briefcase. Harrison did not have a cart this time. He gestured to the freezer aisle, a slight flick of his gloved hand. "The birds," he said, his voice quiet. The silent man moved with a sudden, fluid speed. He retrieved a cart, strode to the freezer, and began loading it, not with cans, with turkeys. More frozen turkeys. I counted them as the assistant, who moved with a disturbing lack of effort, placed them on my belt. 8, 10, 12 more massive, rock-solid birds, each thudding onto the black conveyor. More donations, sir, I managed, my voice sticking in my throat. "A miscalculation by the shelter," Harrison said. He wasn't looking at the turkeys. He was watching me. Their need was greater than anticipated. It often is. As I began scanning the birds, beep, thud, an elderly woman in the lane next to mine, lane 5, fumbled with her purse. A jar of cranberry sauce slipped from her grasp and shattered on the floor. A dark, viscous splash. She let out a cry of distress. "Oh, dear. Oh, my goodness. I'm so sorry." Dave, my manager, was nowhere to be seen. The woman looked close to tears. Instinct took over. I held up a single finger to my grandfather. "One moment, sir." I leaned over to the woman. "Ma'am, please don't worry about it. It's just a jar." I grabbed the store discount card we kept zip-tied to the register, the one for appeasing angry customers or fixing errors. I scanned it. I'm taking $5 off your bill for the trouble. You go on. We'll get this cleaned up. Oh, bless you, she stammered, flustered. Happy Thanksgiving, I said, giving her a weak smile. I turned back to my lane. Harrison Cooper had not moved. He had watched the entire exchange. His bright blue eyes were fixed on me, his expression unreadable, but intense. The silent assistant was now placing the final turkey on the scale. As he reached forward, his suit cuff, perfectly tailored, rode up his wrist by perhaps half an inch. He was wearing thin, black leather gloves, but beneath the edge of the glove, I saw the clasp of his watch. It was heavy, platinum or white gold, and the clasp was engraved with two ornate, looping initials, H.C. My heart kicked against my ribs. A hard, painful thump. Harrison Cooper. This was his man. This was real. The assistant paid for the second load of turkeys. Again, with old, soft bills counted from a money clip. He handled the cash with a crisp, impersonal efficiency. As I handed the man the receipt, Harrison finally spoke. His voice was low, cutting through the hum of the freezers. You are quick to offer a discount that is not yours to give. I stiffened. Was he criticizing me? It's store policy. Sir? Customer retention. She was upset. Was she? He said. It wasn't a question. He looked past me, toward the empty, cavernous store. It was almost 6 p.m., dark outside. The holiday was, for all intents and purposes, over. He turned that piercing gaze back to me. A question. Hazel, did you choose this place today? This linoleum altar, to be seen more clearly? The question was so strange, so surgical. It threw me off balance. Seen more clearly, I thought of my family, of the bright, loud performance of their Thanksgiving. The photos I knew were flooding the squad group chat, the birthday cheesecake, celebrating me in my absence. No, I said. The answer came out, stark and true, before I could filter it. I chose it so I wouldn't be seen at all. A long second of silence passed. The assistant stood like a statue. Harrison Cooper nodded, a slow, deep acknowledgement. Invisibility, he said, his voice a gravelly murmur. It is a powerful shield. It keeps the predators at bay. But be careful. He held my gaze. Stay there too long, and it becomes a prison. My breath caught. A prison. That was exactly what my life at Meridian, my life as the family resource, had become. The silent assistant stepped forward. He placed the heavy leather briefcase on the bagging area at the end of my lane. The sound of the brushed metal latches clicking open was incredibly loud in the quiet store. Click, click. It sounded like a gun being cocked. He opened the case. It was lined with dark velvet, and inside, nestled in a custom-fit indentation, was a single, thick, cream-colored envelope. It looked exactly like the ones I'd seen my mother tear in half. The assistant, still wearing his gloves, lifted the envelope and placed it on the counter in front of me. It was heavy. It was not just a letter. My associates have been auditing, Harrison said, the word sounding clinical. It seems several pieces of correspondence intended for you have been chronically mishandled, intercepted, one might say. This is a copy. My hand was shaking. I didn't touch it. A copy of what? A provision, an addendum to the primary governing document of the Pine Bridge Family Trust. A rather archaic, but binding, piece of governance. I believe it belongs to you. My fingers felt numb, but not from the cold. I picked it up. The vellum was heavy, expensive. I opened the unsealed flap. Inside was not a letter. It was a document, bound in a simple, dark blue cover. The title was embossed in gold leaf, Addendum 4B, the Thanksgiving Clause. I pulled out the 3 pages. They were dense with legal text, clauses and subclauses. My eyes swam, trying to find meaning. And then I saw it, a single paragraph, highlighted in a faint, faded yellow, as if it had been marked by a lawyer decades ago. I read the words, my pulse drumming in my ears. In the event of a fiduciary dispute or demonstrated repeated financial mismanagement by the primary beneficiaries. A tertiary heir may be granted temporary signatory authority over the trust's liquid assets. This right is activated under a specific and non-negotiable condition that said, heir is verified, on the federal holiday of Thanksgiving, to be actively and voluntarily engaged in community service, defined herein as labor for the public good, rather than personal gain. I kept reading, my breath growing shallow. This right is contingent on said heir being the only eligible beneficiary who has, to this date, made no formal financial request of the trust or its chairman. I had to read it twice. The only heir who has not asked, Brielle, with her failing boutique, my mother and father, constantly upside down, floating on loans I now suspected came from somewhere other than their own bank, and me, the invisible one, the one who was told the letters were junk mail, the one scrubbing toilets for her sister's vacation, the one working a double on Thanksgiving to hide. I looked up, my head spinning. The beep of my register, reminding me I was idle, sounded like a warning siren. You're him, I whispered, the name a statement, not a question. You're Harrison Cooper. He did not smile. He did not confirm or deny. He simply watched my face, his expression neutral, as if I were a complex equation he was finally solving. He was a scientist. I was the specimen. That document is a copy, he said, his voice flat, ignoring my realization. The original is held by counsel, but the provision is active. It is, in fact, active until midnight tonight. He pointed a gloved finger at the business card still sitting by my register, the one he had given me an hour before, the one with the name Elise Corcoran. Esco. You asked me a question earlier, he said, about freezing things. Injustice is not a force of nature. Hazel, it is not an accident. It is a series of choices made by human beings, and choices can be stopped. They can be frozen. He tapped the card. If a day should come, if a moment arrives when you find yourself in need of freezing an injustice, you call that number. You call Elise Corcoran. She is expecting to hear from you. Expecting to hear from me. The words landed like stones. This was not a chance encounter. This was a test. This entire day. But wait, I said, my voice rising. My mind was exploding with questions. Why now? Why me? Why a grocery store? I don't understand. He turned, his long coat sweeping the air. The silent assistant snapped the briefcase shut. The click-click of the latches was a sound of absolute finality. Discipline, Hazel Cooper, Harrison said, his back to me now as he began to walk away. You have it. You built it in the silence. When you thought no one was watching. Do not be afraid to use it. And then they were gone. The assistant didn't even push the cart of turkeys. He simply left it, knowing a stock boy would deal with it. They walked out the automatic doors and disappeared into the cold. Black Thanksgiving night. I was left alone in Lane 6. The store was silent, save for the hum of the freezers and the tinny, cheerful carols. Beep, 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 my register, idle, was calling for the next customer, but there was no one. I looked down at the thick, heavy envelope in my hands. The only heir who has not asked, found, serving the community. My God, he hadn't just found me here. He had been looking for me. He had known I would be here. My choice to work this shift, the shift I took to hide from my family, to become invisible, was the one thing that had made me visible to him. I had been vetted. I had been tested. My invisibility had been my audition. A cold, sharp wave of adrenaline hit me, more potent than any fear I had ever known. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. It was a cold, hard, beautiful clarity. I carefully folded the document and put it in my apron pocket, next to the business card. I still had 2 hours left on my shift, 2 hours of scanning and bagging, of being invisible. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was armed. I walked out of the Greenhaven market at exactly 8:03 p.m. The double time and a half pay meant nothing. My pockets felt heavy, not with cash, but with the weight of the document and the business card. The night was cold and sharp, the streets empty. Thanksgiving was over. I drove home to my new apartment at Riverside Flats in a daze. It was my sanctuary, the place I had rented to build a wall against my family. 45 minutes of highway, just me and the hum of the engine. But the wall felt thin tonight. I let myself in. The silence of the apartment was absolute. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked to the living room and sat on my sofa, the streetlights outside casting long, geometric shadows on the floor. The heavy vellum envelope from Harrison Cooper seemed to glow on the coffee table. Active until midnight tonight. I looked at my phone. 8:52 p.m. Elise Corcoran. ESCA, Fiduciary Council. My heart was hammering. This was insane. It was a fairy tale, a trap, a bizarre test by a billionaire ghost. If I called, what would happen if I didn't? What was I losing? The memory of my mother's voice. "It's junk mail, honey," echoed in my head. They had been hiding this. They had actively prevented me from knowing this world. This man, this power, existed. I picked up the phone. My fingers were clumsy, numb. I typed the number from the card. I held my breath. It rang once. A voice answered. So clear and immediate it made me jump. "Corcoran." It wasn't a hello. It wasn't a greeting. It was an identification. "Hello?" I stammered, my voice sounding weak in the silence. "My name is Hazel Cooper. I was given this number by Harrison Cooper. I met him tonight at the Greenhaven Market. I was expecting your call." "Ms. Cooper?" the voice replied. It was female, crisp, and utterly devoid of holiday warmth. It was the voice of a surgical instrument. "I assume you have had time to review Addendum 4B. "The Thanksgiving clause," I whispered. "Is it real? Is this a real thing?" "The Pinebridge Trust does not engage in theoreticals. It is a binding legal provision, and as of this moment, you are the sole qualifying heir. The activation window closes at midnight, Eastern Standard Time. You have, by my clock, 3 hours and 6 minutes. 3 hours. My stomach twisted. My grandfather, he said I was being tested. "Mr. Cooper is given to theatricality," Elise Corcoran said, her tone as dry as ice. "This was not a test. Ms. Cooper, it was a verification. We have been monitoring the communications to your address for several years, noting their interception. We have been monitoring your employment, your lack of personal debt, and your complete absence from any list of fiduciary requests. When you volunteered for the holiday shift at Greenhaven, you triggered the final condition." My God, they hadn't been testing me. They had been building a case. "We require confirmation of your community service to file the activation," she continued, her voice all business. I said, my voice stronger now. "I worked at the Greenhaven Market on Thanksgiving. My manager was Dave Pollock. I clocked in at noon. I clocked out at 8:03 p.m. "We are aware," she said. "We have already remotely accessed the payroll records from Greenhaven's parent corporation. 1 8-hour shift, classified as essential holiday labor. We also have a signed affidavit from Mr. Pollock, secured an hour ago, confirming your voluntary acceptance of the shift." I sank back into the sofa. They had moved faster than I could even comprehend. They had been at the store, the man with the HC watch. "We also have," Elise continued, "the credit card receipts for 2 separate bulk donation purchases made by Mr. Cooper and processed by your register, confirming your station and active labor. The prerequisites of the clause have been satisfied. Ms. Cooper, the authority is yours to claim. We simply require your verbal confirmation before the midnight deadline to file the injunction." An injunction, a freeze, the words Harrison had used. What would that mean? I asked. What would I be doing? There was a faint sound of typing. "My audit, which I have been preparing for 6 months, shows significant financial abuse by the primary beneficiaries your father's branch, specifically your sister, Brielle Cooper. Funds designated for your father's business development have been systematically and improperly diverted to a failing retail entity known as La Belle Brielle. The trust is being bled to cover her operational losses and, I must note, extensive personal credit card debt. It was exactly as I'd suspected, but 1,000 times worse. The question, Ms. Cooper, Elise said, her voice dropping into a cold, precise monotone, is simple. The trust provides for your family's baseline needs. But this is hemorrhaging. Do you wish to activate your temporary authority as trustee? Do you want to freeze those discretionary accounts? Freeze them. The words hung in the air of my dark apartment. Freeze my family. The years of servitude flashed in my mind. The Saturdays lost, the stolen vacation, the birthday cheesecake I never got to eat, the constant, draining assumption that my time, my money, and my energy were not my own, but a community resource. But to freeze them, to cut them off. It felt monstrous. It felt cold. I don't know, I whispered. This is too much. This is too fast. I need to think. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, not a sympathetic silence, an impatient one. As I said, you have until midnight, Elise Corcoran said. If you do nothing, the window closes. The authority returns to the primary beneficiaries. Mr. Cooper's hands will be tied by the charter, and they will never, ever be audited this way again. Think quickly. Ms. Cooper. The line clicked dead. I stared at my phone. 3 hours. I was pacing now. My heart a trapped bird in my chest. Freeze them. Freeze them. It was one thing to hide from them at a grocery store. It was another thing to declare war. My phone buzzed in my hand. A notification. Social media. My stomach dropped. I never checked it on holidays. It was always a minefield of other people's perfect lives. But I opened it. The first thing I saw was a post from 2 weeks ago. It was from my Aunt May. She was my father's sister, the only member of the Cooper clan who ever treated me like a person, not a project. She had visited my new apartment, brought me a pothos as a housewarming gift, and had been genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy for me. She had taken one picture, a simple, artless shot of my small, clean kitchen, my new kettle, the white subway tile I had installed myself. Her caption was painfully sweet. So proud of my niece Hazel. Working hard at her biosystems job and living so beautifully tidy in her new place, you deserve all the good things. Sweetie. The post had been innocent. I had liked it and forgotten it, but now I saw the comments underneath. It had, in the small, toxic ecosystem of my extended family, gone viral. The first comment was from my mother. Ruth. We are always so proud of our Hazel. We raised her to be responsible. The we felt like a branding iron. We built this. We own this. Then the cousins, a relative I barely knew. Wow. Riverside Flats. That's pricey. Somebody's doing well. Another must be nice. Wish my job paid for that. The post, I realized, had been forwarded, shared. It had been screenshotted and dissected. My phone buzzed again. A direct message. From Brielle. I hadn't opened it. I had been practicing my new discipline of waiting. I opened it now. It was a screenshot of Aunt May's photo of my kitchen. Below it, a single line of text from my sister. Brielle. Hey, Mom sent me May's picture. Fun. Your place looks expensive. Really living it up. I see. There was no congratulations. No, I'm happy for you. It was an appraisal. It was an inventory. It was the cold, calculating assessment of a predator that has just discovered a new food source. Hazel has money. Hazel has a new, expensive resource we have not yet tapped. I felt sick. I looked at the clock. 10:45 p.m. I thought about Elise's words. A failing retail entity, extensive personal credit card debt. Brielle wasn't just admiring my kitchen. She was measuring it. And then, as if summoned by the devil himself, my phone buzzed one more time. The screen lit up. Incoming text. Mom. My blood ran cold. I opened it. It was a wall of text, vibrating with a false, manic cheerfulness. Mom, honey, just saw May's post again. Your place looks so lovely, big enough for all of us. Finally, we've made a decision. Your father and I just bought tickets. We're flying in tomorrow. We land at noon. I stopped reading. Bought tickets. Not, can we visit? Not, are you free? I forced myself to read the rest. Mom Brielle is driving down with the boys. 2. The whole family. We're all coming to see your new place. We'll stay for a few days to help you really settle in. Just make sure you're home from that little grocery job of yours to let us in. Can't wait, heart emoji. Heart emoji. Heart emoji. I dropped the phone on the sofa. This was not a visit. This was an invasion. This was an occupation. They had seen my sanctuary, my wall, my one-bedroom apartment, and seen a free hotel, a new base of operations, a resource to be colonized. Make sure you're home. The disrespect was so profound, so complete. It took my breath away. They weren't just ignoring my boundaries. They were actively strafing them, laughing as they flew over the wreckage. This was the injustice. This was the culmination of every missed birthday, every stolen Saturday, every weaponized heart emoji, every single time I had been told, "You're just so much better at this. You have more free time. It's not a big deal for you." It was a big deal. My apartment, my sanctuary. I looked at the clock. 11:01 p.m. My heart was no longer a trapped bird. It was a block of ice. It was cold, and hard, and perfectly, completely still. The clarity I felt was terrifying. I picked up my phone. I went to my recent calls. I hit the name at the top. Corcoran. It rang once. Corcoran. My voice was not my own. It was low, steady, and had all the warmth of the Green Haven freezer aisle. "This is Hazel Cooper." There was a pause. "Ms. Cooper, you've made a decision." I looked at my mother's text message, the 3 smiling heart emojis staring at me like a threat. "Yes," I said. "Activate it. File the injunction. Freeze them. Freeze every single dollar," I said. "Freeze every single dollar." There was no triumph in it, just the cold, heavy click of a lock seating into place. Elise Corcoran did not congratulate me. "The motion is filed," she said, her voice identical to how it had been 3 hours prior. "It is 11:03 p.m. The injunction will be active by the time the banks open tomorrow. The day after Thanksgiving, you are now the temporary signatory trustee for all non-essential disbursements." "What happens now?" I asked, looking at my mother's cheerful, invasive text message. "They land at noon." "Now, you are prepared," Elise said. "Check your encrypted email. I sent you the summary 5 minutes ago. The password is the name of the man who managed your shift." "Dave." I hung up. My laptop was on the kitchen counter. I opened it. Encrypted email. Password. Dave. It opened. It was not a long, complicated legal document. It was a summary, a single, brutal page titled, "Fiduciary Review G. Cooper Branch." It was just as Elise had said, but the numbers were staggering. La Belle Brielle, my sister's vanity project, wasn't just losing money, it was a black hole. It had been insolvent for 2 years. Brielle had been paying her personal credit cards, her spa days, her dinners, directly from her business account, which was funded by transfers from my parents. But the real data was under the heading parental co-financing. My parents, Ruth and Graham, hadn't just been spotting her money, they had been systematically draining their own resources, which were subsidized by the trust, to keep her fantasy alive. I saw a line item, vehicle lien. My blood went cold. They had taken out a second mortgage on their car, a depreciating asset, to fund her oatmeal-colored scarves, and they had done it 3 months ago, just before my birthday. The one they forgot. They had never asked me for a dime, I realized, with a sickening lurch. Why, I wasn't the first option. I was the last. I was the emergency fund they hadn't broken into yet. They had bled every other resource dry. And now, seeing my new apartment, they had decided it was my turn. But the lease was the masterpiece. Elise had attached a scanned PDF of the contract Brielle had signed for her warehouse space. It wasn't a standard lease. It contained a liquidated damages clause. If the business defaulted, the penalty was not just the remaining rent. It was an accelerated penalty of $42,000, due immediately. No sane person would sign that. Unless you knew you would never have to pay it. Unless you knew a bailout was guaranteed. Brielle wasn't just being bad at business. She was gambling. Recklessly. With money she assumed was hers. She had been betting on the family, knowing that family, so, in the end, always meant someone would step in. First my parents, and when they were tapped out, me. I closed the laptop. The financial report gave my old text messages a new, horrifying clarity. I scrolled back, years back. In the squad chat, Mom Hazel, honey, can you help Brielle with her taxes? You're so good with numbers. She's just swamped. That text was from April. The week LaBelle Brielle took its first nosedive. She wasn't asking for help. She was recruiting an unpaid accountant to hide the losses. Brielle has. I know you're on vacation, but can you just look at my site? It's crashing. That was the vacation I spent babysitting. She wasn't trying to fix a website. She was trying to secure a new loan and needed me out of the way. Kept busy. Mom, you're just freer. Honey, help your sister out. Freer. That was the word. It didn't mean unoccupied. It meant unclaimed. A resource waiting to be mined. My hands were shaking. I opened the journal I had started when I moved to Riverside Flats. It was my one space for truth. I turned to a blank page and wrote, every time I gave them my time, I was telling them it was worthless. Every time I said yes to a small favor, I was devaluing myself. My availability was not a kindness. It was their expectation. The girl who had been complimented by Harrison Cooper for her discipline was the same girl who had none when it came to her own family. I had been organized at my job, meticulous at the grocery store, but a complete, porous mess in my own life. The invasion was coming. Noon tomorrow. I called Elise back. They're coming here, I said. Tomorrow at noon. All of them. My mother, my father, Brielle, her 2 kids. No, Elise said, her voice sharp. They are not. They bought tickets. They're just showing up. That's what they do. Ms. Cooper, Hazel, you are the temporary trustee. You are not their innkeeper. You have been trained your whole life to absorb their demands. That training ends tonight. What do I do? I whispered. First, Elise said, you learn the most powerful word in the fiduciary vocabulary, no. Second, you control the environment. They cannot meet you in your home. That is your sanctuary. They meet you on your terms, in your territory. The Pine Bridge Foundation, she said. It is a neutral site. It is also our building. I have booked the 3rd floor conference room for 3 p.m. tomorrow. It is soundproof and has full audio and video recording capabilities. Recording. This was real. But they'll be at my apartment at noon, I said, my panic rising. They'll be banging on the door. You will not be there, Elise instructed. You will send one, single, clear text message to the squad. You will state that you cannot meet them at your apartment. You will state that there is a serious family financial matter, and you have arranged a formal meeting at the Pine Bridge Foundation at 3 p.m. Do not apologize. Do not explain. Do not use heart emojis. You are not their daughter right now. You are their banker. They won't listen. They'll come here anyway, I insisted, the old helplessness creeping in. That is fine, Elise said, her voice like steel. Let them. They will find the door locked, and they will find your new rules. This is how you teach them. Hazel, you set the condition. You establish the boundary. This, I understood. This was like setting protocols in the lab. After I hung up, I went back to my laptop. I opened a word processor. The font was large, clear, and cold. Times New Roman, 30 point. I typed, Guest rules for this apartment. 1. All visits must be scheduled 48 hours in advance. 2. No unscheduled visitors will be admitted. This is a secure building. 3. All personal belongings, including coats and bags, will remain in the entryway. 4. Children are welcome, but must be supervised. Running, shouting, or handling of property is not permitted. A reading area will be provided. I thought of Brielle's boys, who were taught that expression meant destruction. 5. Closets, desks, and bedroom doors are private and are not to be opened. For my mother, the snooper. 6. No video, audio, or live streaming is permitted within this apartment. For Brielle, who documented everything for her brand, I hit print. The single page slid out of my printer. The ink stark black on the white paper. I walked to my front door, the inside of my front door, and taped it up. Right at eye level, it was a declaration, a manifesto. I went back to my sofa. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, hard resolve. I looked at the table, the heavy vellum envelope from Harrison, the business card, my shift, the donations, the reason I had this power. I found my apron, still draped over a dining chair, smelling faintly of artificial pumpkin. I took out my receipts from the Greenhaven shift, the punch-out slip showing my hours, the copy of the donation receipts Harrison had paid for. This wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was a moral one. I had earned this, not by asking, but by working, by serving. While they were consuming, I placed the receipts in the envelope with the Thanksgiving clause. It was my evidence, legal and ethical leverage. I sat there, in the dark, my guest rules glowing faintly on the door. I had 3 hours until sunrise. I remembered Elise's final words from our second call. They will scream, Hazel. They will accuse you of being cold, of being cruel. They will tell you that you are destroying the family. What do I say? I had asked. Nothing, Elise replied. Your power is not in what you say. It is in what you are now authorized to do. Remember this, a new power is only valuable when you have the discipline to use it at precisely the right moment. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., I would use it. I didn't send the text. Elise suggested. I knew them. A text would be ignored, treated as a suggestion. I had to let them hit the wall. I woke up the next day, the day after Thanksgiving, feeling hollowed out and sharp. I did not go to my shift at Greenhaven Market. I called Dave and told him I had a family emergency, which was, for the first time in my life, the absolute truth. I spent the morning sitting on my sofa, drinking black coffee, and staring at the guest rules taped to my door. At 11:55 a.m., the intercom buzzed, a harsh, demanding sound that echoed in the quiet apartment. I stood up, my heart a cold, steady drum. I walked to the intercom and pressed the talk button. Hello? My mother's voice, artificially bright and booming, filled the speaker. Hazel, honey, we're here. Buzz us in. It's freezing. I can't let you all come up, I said, my voice flat, a beat of stunned silence. What? Don't be silly. Honey, it's us. We've got the kids, and I have a cake. I will come down to the lobby, I said. Please wait there. I didn't wait for a reply. I put on my shoes, grabbed my keys, and took the elevator down. They were a whirlwind of noise and luggage, completely taking over the small, elegant lobby of Riverside Flats. My father, Graham, looked tired, holding 2 large suitcases. My mother, Ruth, was holding a white bakery box, and Brielle. Brielle was flanked by her 2 sons, who were already trying to climb the decorative ficus tree in the corner. There you are, Mom chirped, rushing forward to hug me. I didn't hug back. I just stood there, and she awkwardly patted my arm. You look tired. Honey, that little job of yours. She pushed the bakery box at me. I brought your favorite coconut cream. It was my father's favorite. My favorite was Black Forest. She had never known the difference. Thank you, I said, not taking the box. It's Dad's favorite. You can leave it with the concierge. You can't come up. Their smiles froze. The lobby's quiet classical music suddenly felt very loud. What do you mean? We can't come up, Brielle snapped, yanking her son off the plant. We just flew in. We drove. We're here. Boys, I said, looking past the adults to my two nephews. They were hyperactive, fed on travel sugar, and clearly looking for something to destroy. It's good to see you, but this is a very quiet building. If we're going to talk, I need you to sit on that bench and read. I pointed to the upholstered bench by the elevators. Brielle opened her mouth to protest, but I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 new comic books I had bought that morning. The boys, seeing the bright covers, actually went quiet and scrambled for the bench. I had successfully, and gently, neutralized them. There would be no chaos. There would be no using them as a shield or an excuse. Now, it was just the adults. Hazel, what is this? My father asked, his voice full of that familiar, disappointed weariness. We came all this way. You came uninvited, I said, my voice low and even. You announced an invasion. You didn't ask. Brielle let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. An invasion? Are you kidding me? We're your family. She immediately began walking around the lobby, her eyes scanning everything, the marble floors, the brushed steel fixtures. Wow. Okay, this place is a lot. She turned back to me, her eyes narrowed in appraisal, the look I had seen in her text message, but now in person. Seriously, what did this place cost? How much was the deposit? What is Meridian really paying you? Her questions were rapid fire, stripping away any pretense of a social visit. This was a financial audit. This was a resource assessment. I ignored her. I looked at my mother, who was still clutching the cake box. Her smile strained. Why are you all here? I asked. Not for a visit, not to see me. You've never been interested in that. So why? My mother looked at my father. My father looked at his shoes. Brielle rolled her eyes. The silence was the answer. Finally, my mother put the cake box down on a side table, her movements stiff. She wiped her hands on her coat. Hazel, this is not the time or place. It's the only time and place you're getting, I said. Why are you here? Mom took a deep breath, and the performance of the loving mother dissolved, replaced by the stressed, brittle negotiator I knew so well. It's Brielle. She's in some trouble. With the boutique. I know, I said. That stopped them. Brielle's head snapped toward me. What do you mean? You know. I know about the losses, I said. I know about the debt. I know about the car. My father flinched. We just need a little help, my mother said, her voice dropping into a wheedling, pleading tone that had always worked on me before. It's just a temporary cash flow problem. Your sister, she signed a lease, a bad one. There's a penalty. How much? I asked, though I already knew the answer. $42,000, Mom whispered, as if saying it quietly made the number smaller. It's due at the end of the month. Hazel, honey, they'll take her business. They'll ruin her. I looked at Brielle. She wasn't crying. She wasn't ashamed. She was looking at me with an expression of defiant expectation. She had gambled. She had lost. And now she was here to cash in her Hazel chip. So you came here, I said, letting the pieces connect for them out loud. You saw the picture of my apartment. You assumed I had money. And you decided I was the solution. You're her sister, my mother hissed, her eyes darting toward the concierge desk. This is a family matter, my father mumbled. Yes, it is, I said. A family matter. I laughed, a short, cold, bitter sound that surprised even me. It's funny, isn't it? I'm family when there's a bill to be paid. I'm family when the gutters are full or the kids need a babysitter. But when it's my birthday, I'm an afterthought. When I get a promotion, I'm an interruption. When I move into my own place, I'm a bank. I shook my head. No, I'm not doing it. Hazel. My mother's voice was a sharp crack. Just sell the apartment, Brielle said suddenly, her voice flat and demanding. It's that simple. I stared at her. Sell my apartment My home, the one I just moved into. You can move back in with us, Mom offered, as if this were a prize. We'll have so much fun, all of us together again. You're not listening, I said. The answer is no. It's a difficult time right now. Hazel, my father said, trying to be the peacemaker. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. Your sister. My sister is 32 years old, I cut in, my voice sharp. She is a grown woman and a terrible business person. Her emergency is not my problem. My God. Hazel. Brielle stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. Why are you being like this? It's just money, you can get more. Besides, your boyfriend is rich. Isn't he that guy Ethan you've been hiding? He can pay for it. The air in the lobby crackled. My blood turned to ice. She had crossed a line that she didn't even know existed. I took one step toward her, and for the first time, Brielle flinched, as if I might hit her. I didn't raise my voice. I lowered it. You will not talk about him, I said, the words precise and deadly. Ethan is my partner. He is not your resource. He is not your ATM. He is mine, and you will never, ever ask him for a single cent. Do you understand me? Brielle was speechless. My mother looked horrified. The atmosphere was thick, unbreathable. I had broken the script. I was no longer the reliable, accommodating utility. I was something else, something they didn't recognize. I held my sister's gaze until she looked away. I took a deep breath, regaining the cold calm I'd felt that morning. The answer is no. I will not be selling my home. I will not be giving you $42,000. But, Hazel, my father started. We are done talking about this here, I said, cutting him off. I looked at all three of them. You came here for a financial meeting. You're going to get one, but not here, not on my doorstep. I pulled a single, crisp business card from my pocket, not Elise's, one I had printed at an all-night shop. It had an address on it. Be at this address at 3 p.m. sharp, I said, holding it out. My father took it. It's the Pine Bridge Foundation building, downtown. A meeting has been arranged. Pine Bridge, my father said, the name turning his face pale. Hazel, what have you done? I've done what you should have done years ago, I said. I've called a lawyer. You can't, my mother shrieked, forgetting to whisper. You don't understand that side of the family, your grandfather. I understand perfectly, I said. I met him, on Thanksgiving. The blood drained from my mother's face. She looked at my father in pure panic. The lies, decades of them, were unraveling. 3 p.m., I said. Be there, or don't. But this conversation, the one where you treat me like a wallet, is over. I turned to my nephews, who were still dutifully reading their comics, oblivious. It was good to see you, boys. We'll play another time. I walked toward the elevator. Hazel, wait, my mother cried, her voice cracking with real desperation. You can't just walk away. You're being so cold. I stopped. I turned back to her, my hand on the elevator button. The word, cold, hung in the air. The same word Harrison had used. The freezer aisle. Freezing the injustice. No, Mom, I said. And my voice was not angry. It was just tired. And it was true. I'm not being cold. I'm just finally learning how to be warm to myself. I pressed the button. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and didn't look back as they closed, leaving my family and the coconut cream cake alone in the lobby. I arrived at the Pine Bridge Foundation at 2:45 p.m. It was not a warm, inviting building. It was a monolith of dark glass and brushed steel, a corporate fortress that reflected the cold, bruised gray sky. The day after Thanksgiving was just a workday here. I didn't have to give my name. The same silent, broad-shouldered man who had been with my grandfather at the store was waiting for me in the lobby. He wore the same black suit, the same sunglasses, even though we were indoors. He just nodded once and gestured toward the elevator. We rode up in total silence. The only sound, a faint, synthesized chime as we passed floors. He used a key card to access the third floor. The doors opened onto a hushed, carpeted hallway. He led me to a set of tall, frosted glass doors and simply opened one, holding it for me to pass. It was a conference room, but it felt more like an operating theater. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, overlooking the gray city. In the center was a massive, black, polished table that felt as deep and cold as a frozen lake. Elise Corcoran stood at the far end, not sitting. She was impossibly sharp. Her dark hair pulled back into a severe knot. She wore a gray suit that looked more structured than built. She was exactly as her voice had sounded a surgical instrument. The silent assistant took a position by the door. His hands clasped. He did not leave, and then I saw him, sitting at the table, perfectly still, was the old man in the fedora. Today, he was not wearing the old wool coat. He was in a perfectly tailored three-piece suit, the color of charcoal. His fedora was gone, revealing a full head of thick, perfectly white hair. He looked, if possible, even more formidable. "Ms. Cooper," Elise said, her voice clipping the silence. "Thank you for being punctual." "Hello," I said. The room seemed to absorb the sound. "This," Elise gestured to the man at the table, "is Harrison Cooper, your grandfather." Harrison Cooper did not stand. He just watched me, those same bright, analytical eyes taking my measure. "Hazel," he said. It was a statement of fact. A commotion sounded in the hall. The glass doors swung open, and my family tumbled in. A chaotic wave of noise and damp coats. My mother, my father, and Brielle. They had left the children with a relative, or perhaps in the car. I didn't know or care. They looked frantic, angry, and completely out of place. "There you are," my mother, Ruth, began, pointing a finger at me. "What is this? What is this place? And who in the hell are you?" This last part was directed at Elise. My father saw Harrison. He stopped dead. His face went a chalky, sickly white. "Oh, my God," he whispered, looking at his father for the first time in what must have been 30 years. "Dad." Harrison just looked at him, his expression cold. "Graham, you look soft." "Sit," Elise commanded, her voice cutting through the reunion like a diamond. My family, stunned by the wealth of the room and the presence of the patriarch, actually sat. They huddled together on one side of the vast table, looking like shipwreck survivors. "This is a formal meeting," Elise began, her hands resting flat on the polished table. "It has been called by the acting temporary trustee of the Pinebridge Family Trust, Ms. Hazel Cooper." Brielle let out a sound, half laugh, half scoff. "Acting what, Hazel? She works at a grocery store." Elise ignored her. She reached down and placed a document on the table. It was not a copy. It was the original. It was bound in dark blue leather, the gold embossing of the Thanksgiving clause seeming to glow in the dim room. She slid it to the center of the table. "As per the binding addendum 4B of the Pinebridge Trust," Elise stated, "a tertiary heir who meets a specific set of criteria may assume temporary signatory authority. The criteria are 1. That the heir has made no prior financial request of the trust, and 2. That the heir is verified to be engaged in voluntary community service on the Thanksgiving holiday." Elise then produced a thin, clear folder. She laid it open. "We have," she said, tapping the first paper, "one digital timesheet from the Greenhaven Market, number 874, confirming Ms. Hazel Cooper worked an 8-hour shift from 12 p.m. to 8:03 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. We have one signed affidavit from her shift manager, David Pollock, confirming the voluntary nature of this shift. And we have," she tapped the final pages, "validated receipts for 2 separate, substantial charitable donations, processed by Ms. Cooper's register, confirming her active station. The conditions have been met." My mother found her voice. It was high and shrill. "This is insane. It's a trick. It's unjust. You can't just give everything to her because she worked one day. We are his family. Graham is your son." The room was silent. Harrison Cooper, who had been staring out the glass wall at the city, slowly turned his head. He looked at my mother. His voice was not loud, but it filled the room, chilling the air. "Injustice. Ruth," he said, his words slow and measured, "is turning a grandchild into an endless, uncompensated supply chain for her sister's failures. Injustice is intercepting her legal correspondence for a decade to keep her ignorant and pliable. Injustice." His eyes flicked to my father. "Is raising a son so soft? He would rather sacrifice his own daughter than confront his wife. Do not speak to me of injustice. I have been watching it fester in your home for 20 years. My father put his head in his hands. My mother's mouth was open, but no sound came out. The precision of his attack, the fact that he knew about the intercepted mail, had shattered her, Brielle, seeing her primary defender crumble. Switched tactics instantly. The anger vanished, replaced by a desperate, wheedling plea. "Wait," she said, leaning forward. Okay. I messed up. With the lease, I get it. But the business, it's just a cash flow problem. It's about to turn a corner. I know it is." She looked past Elise, past Harrison, directly at me. Her sister, her resource. Please, she begged. Don't do this. Just give me 6 months. 6 months. That's all I need. I can turn it all around. I swear. It's my dream. Hazel. You can't just kill my dream. Her dream, Harrison murmured, as if to himself, is built on your silence. Elise paid no attention to Brielle's plea. She looked only at me. From a slim leather briefcase by her feet, she produced a folder. It was thin, bound in the same dark blue leather as the trust document. She slid it across the polished expanse of the table. It stopped directly in front of me. I opened it. Inside, there were only 2 pages. Each was a single, stark document. At the bottom of each was a single, black line. Trustee signatory. And resting in the fold of the leather spine was a pen. It was not a cheap plastic pen from a bank. It was heavy, made of polished black metal, cold to the touch. The cap clicked off with a solid, expensive sound. It was a tool. It was a weapon. It felt, in my hand, as heavy as a block of stone. It was the weight of every yes I had ever been forced to say, and the weight of the one no I was about to. It was the physical, tangible weight of responsibility. You have 2 orders before you, Ms. Cooper, Elise said, her voice a flat, procedural monotone. She pointed to the first page. Order 1. This is an immediate and indefinite freeze on all discretionary funds, credit lines, and emergency disbursements associated with Brielle Cooper and her entity, La Belle Brielle. It also freezes any parental accounts from which she has been drawing funds, pending a full, independent forensic audit to determine the extent of the misuse. Freeze them. The word echoed in my head. Elise pointed to the second page. Order 2. This authorizes the immediate establishment of the Cooper Nephews Educational Trust. This is a protected, walled-off fund. It will provide for all future tuition, medical, dental, and defined educational expenses for your 2 nephews. She looked, for a split second, at Brielle, who was listening in horror. All payments, Elise finished, will be made directly to the institutions. No funds will pass through any parental or guardian accounts, ever. My nephews would be safe. They would be educated. They would be cared for. But they would never be a bargaining chip. I looked at my family. My mother's face was white with a rage so profound she was shaking. My father looked broken. A man who had abdicated all responsibility and was now facing the consequences. Brielle was just staring at the 2 pages, her dream dissolving in front of her. I looked at Harrison Cooper, my grandfather. He was watching me. His bright blue eyes were unreadable. He offered no guidance, no encouragement, no final push. He had set the board. He had given me the piece. He had verified the rules. The move was mine. He just nodded. A single, slow, almost imperceptible gesture. The decision was mine. The power was mine. The pen was heavy in my hand. My hand was steady on the heavy metal pen. Brielle was watching me, her eyes wet, her face a mask of practiced desperation. 6 months? She whispered again, leaning across the vast, polished table. Please, it's all I need. 6 months, Elise Corcoran stated, her voice cutting through the plea. Would make no material difference. The $42,000 you are demanding, Ms. Cooper, would not have gone to operations. That is a lie, Brielle shouted, her voice echoing in the glass room. Elise did not react. She picked up a small black remote from the table. You have not been paying operational costs for some time. She pressed a button. A section of the dark paneled wall slid back, revealing a large integrated screen. It lit up, not with a presentation, but with the cold, hard columns of a bank ledger. The $42,000, Elise said, her voice a clinical monotone as she gestured to the screen, is the second accelerated penalty fee you have incurred in 6 months, the investments your parents have been funneling from their own trust allowance. She clicked, and a new screen showed a flowchart of money moving from my father's account to Brielle's. Have not been used for inventory. They have been used, almost exclusively, to pay the interest on prior defaults. My father squinted, confused. What does that mean? It means, I said, the pieces clicking into place, that you've been paying for a funeral. The business is already dead. The lease, my father mumbled, shaking his head. She said the lease was the problem, a bad contract. The lease, Elise said, her voice dropping. Is the masterpiece? She clicked again. A PDF of the lease agreement filled the screen. She zoomed in on a highlighted section, Clause 11B. I read the title of the clause, and my blood turned to ice. Termination bonus familial bailout. The room was utterly silent. I don't understand, my mother whispered. Bonus. Elise's voice was surgical. It is a custom addendum. I have, in my career, never seen one quite so morally creative. It stipulates that in the event of a default, if the accelerated penalty fee is paid in full by a non-corporate, familial third-party source. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. A termination bonus of $10,000 is to be paid, directly from the landlord, to the signatory, to Ms. Brielle Cooper, as a consulting fee for facilitating the dissolution. My God, Harrison Cooper spoke, his voice a low rumble. She engineered a crisis that would pay her to solve. She was not just gambling that her family would rescue her, she was ensuring she would get a personal reward, a commission, when they did. My mother turned, her whole body moving, to look at Brielle. No, Mom said, her voice paper-thin. Brielle, no, you wouldn't. Brielle's face, which had been pale and pleading, hardened. The mask was gone. It was a face I had never seen before, cold, defiant, and cornered. It's smart, she snapped, her voice brittle. It's protecting my assets. It's just good business. It's theft, Harrison said, flatly. It was an assumption, Elise continued, that the family would pay, and our data shows, she clicked again, that the designated familial third party was, ultimately, Hazel. The screen changed. It was no longer a bank ledger. It was a text thread. The green and gray of my life. I stared at it, horrified. It was a conversation between Brielle and my mother, dated 3 weeks ago, the day after Aunt May posted the picture of my kitchen. Brielle, she has it. Look at that place. She's loaded. She's been hiding it. Mom, I know. Honey. But how do we ask? She's being so difficult, ever since she moved. Brielle. We don't ask. We just go. It's an emergency. We bring the boys. She'll never say no in front of the kids. My breath hitched. She'll never say no in front of the kids. They weren't just a shield. They were a weapon. My nephews were a weapon, aimed at me, and then the last message. The one that took the air from my lungs. Brielle. It's fine. Worst case. The business defaults. We're on her doorstep. She won't let the kids suffer. She'll sell the apartment. She'll pay. She always does. She'll pay. She always does. It wasn't just entitlement. It wasn't just neglect. It was a strategy. It was a cold, calculated plan of emotional and financial extortion. I was the emergency fund. I was the final harvest. My mother made a sound, a deep, gasping, choking sob. It was not a performance. It was the sound of a person breaking. She slumped forward in her chair, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a genuine, unfamiliar horror. She was staring at Brielle. You planned this, she whispered. You were using them, using the boys, using me. In that second, I saw it. My mother finally understood. She wasn't just a facilitator of Brielle's demands. She was a victim of them, too. The favorite daughter had been playing them all. My father, Graham, looked like he had been struck. He looked at me, his eyes desperate, pleading. Hazel, he choked out. I didn't know. I swear to God. I didn't know that. I'm so sorry. But you knew about the letters, I said, my voice flat. The Pine Bridge letters. The ones my mother told me were junk mail. You knew. My father flinched, his gaze dropping to the polished black table. He couldn't look at me. She said they were nothing, he confessed, his voice a broken whisper. Your mother. She said Harrison was just trying to buy you, to poison us against each other. She said, we are a family. He is not, and I believed her. He looked up, his face a ruin of weakness. It was just easier to believe her. Hazel. Easier. It was always easier. Easier to let me drive. Easier to let me pay. Easier to let me clean. Easier to let me be the sacrifice. The room was dead. The text messages glowed on the screen. An epitaph for our family. Harrison Cooper, who had watched this entire exchange with the detached interest of a surgeon, finally turned his gaze from my parents. He showed no pleasure in their destruction, only a deep, profound weariness. He looked at me, only at me. They have shown you who they are, he said, his voice quiet, but carrying across the table. They are trapped in the past. They are trapped in their own broken machinery of lies and habits. He gestured with his chin toward the massive glass wall, toward the gray, sprawling city. The future is the only thing that matters now. Hazel, the past is ballast. You cut it loose. He held my gaze. So, I ask you, what do you want the future to look like? This was it. This was the real question. My hand went to my coat pocket. I pulled out the single, folded sheet of paper I had printed that morning, the guest rules I had taped to my door. Before I knew how deep the rot went, my voice was loud in the silence. I began to read. Rule 1. All visits must be scheduled 48 hours in advance. My mother looked up, her face streaked with tears, confused. Rule 2. No unscheduled visitors will be admitted. Rule 3. Children are welcome, but must be supervised. Rule 5. Closets, desks, and bedroom doors are private and are not to be opened. When I finished, I looked down at the paper. This was defense. This was a list of reactions to a lifetime of boundary crossing. This was the old way. I tore the paper in half, and again, and again. The small white scraps fluttered onto the dark, polished table. These rules, I said, my voice clear and strong, are pointless. This is what you write when you're still expecting to be attacked. I looked at my mother, at my father, and then at my sister. From now on, there is only one rule. Respect. You will respect my time. You will respect my home. You will respect my choices. And you will learn to respect my no. And if you cannot, I paused. You will not be in my life. The rules are done. I turned to Elise. I looked at the 2 orders in the blue leather folder. The future, I said, answering my grandfather's question. Looks like this. I tapped the second page. Order 2, the educational trust for my nephews. This is absolute. It is for the children, their education, their health, their futures. It will be walled off, and it will be protected from everyone in this room, except me. Then, I tapped the first page. Order 1, the freeze. And this, I said, is also absolute. The adult bailouts stop. Now. The emergency funds are cut. The discretionary accounts are frozen. My parents, I looked at them, will live on the standard stipend the trust already provides them, and not 1 cent more. I turned, finally, to Brielle. And you will get a job, a real one. The color, which had drained from Brielle's face, rushed back in a hot, blotchy tide of red. She shot up from her chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "A job!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing off the glass and steel. "A job. You bitch. You can't do this. You are ruining us. You are destroying this family." I did not flinch. I did not move. I just looked at her, my gaze as steady and cold as the pen in my hand. "No, Brielle," I said, my voice quiet, cutting through her rage. "I'm not destroying the family." I held her gaze. "I am destroying the habit of stepping on me." She stood there, speechless, her mouth open, her rage choking her. I looked back down at the table. Elise Corcoran, her face completely impassive, slid the open blue folder and the heavy black pen directly in front of me. Brielle's shriek, "You are destroying this family," was still echoing in the dead. Soundproofed air of the room as I stood up. The pen was still on the table. The orders were still waiting. I did not answer her. I did not look at my mother's pleading face or my father's broken one. I turned my back on all of them and walked. There was a door at the far end of the glass wall. It led to a small, enclosed glass terrace, a useless, decorative appendage sticking out over the city, 20 stories up. It was furnished with 2 sterile white chairs and a dead orchid. It was an atrium of ice. I stepped inside and slid the heavy door shut. The silence was immediate. Brielle's shouting was gone, reduced to a faint, angry vibration I could feel through the soles of my shoes. The city was laid out before me, a sprawling, indifferent map of gray and brown. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and the streets were clogged with shoppers. The cars moving like sluggish, red blood cells. The wind hit the glass with a low, mournful whoosh, but I could not feel it. I pressed my forehead against the glass. It was thick and profoundly cold. It felt good. I closed my eyes, just for a second. The cold on my skin, the silence in my ears. I just breathed, in and out. The air in the atrium was filtered, sterile, with no scent at all. It was the clean, cold air of a laboratory. My pocket vibrated. The sudden physical buzz against my hip was a shock, a jolt back into my own body. I pulled out my phone, my fingers clumsy. The screen lit up Ethan. My breath caught. Ethan, my partner, the man I had spent the last year carefully, fiercely, protecting from this. He was the one good, warm thing in my life. A structure I had built that had nothing to do with the Cooper rot. He knew I had a family meeting. He knew it was bad. I answered, my thumb shaking. "Hey," my voice was a whisper. "Hazel, are you okay?" His voice, God, his voice, it was not polished, or cold, or demanding. It was just warm. It was the warmest thing I had ever known. "You said you'd text. It's almost 4. Are you out?" "I'm in it," I whispered, turning my back to the conference room door, as if they could see me. I pressed my face closer to the cold glass, looking down at the tiny cars. "It's bad. Ethan, it's really bad." There was a pause. I could hear him breathe. "I know," he said, his voice soft, but firm. "I know. Just listen to me. Remember what we talked about. Whatever you choose in there, whatever you decide to do, you choose it for you. I squeezed my eyes shut, a single, hot tear, one I hadn't even known was there, escaped and ran down my cheek. It felt scorching hot in the cold air. Not for them, he continued, his voice a solid anchor in the storm. Not for what they expect, not for what they'll say. You choose it for you. Hazel, for your future. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here when you get out. Go finish it. I love you, I managed to say. I love you too. Go finish it. The line clicked dead. Choose it for you. The words cracked something open in my chest, a block of old, frozen grief, the realization that I had a me to choose for. My phone buzzed again, but it was just a text. I wiped the tear from my face with the back of my hand, angry at the weakness. I looked at the screen. It was from Aunt May, the one who had posted the innocent picture, the only one who had ever sent me a birthday card with no strings attached. Do what's right, Hazel, not what's easy. I stared at the words. Easy. Easy would be to run. Easy would be to tear up the documents, walk out, and let them keep eating me alive. Easy would be to just pay the $42,000 to make the yelling stop. That had been my entire life. Making it easy for everyone else, and impossible for myself. Right was so much harder. Right was the cold pen. A second text from May came through, right below the first. The boys are fine. They're with me, at my house. They were so wired. I took them. They just want peace. They drew this for you. Attached was a photo, a JPEG file. I opened it. It was a child's drawing, a lopsided, impossible turkey, drawn in bright purple and orange crayon on a piece of lined paper. It had 5 legs and a giant, smiling beak. At the top, in huge, reversed letters, it said, "For Hazel." I looked at that drawing, and the last of the ice in my chest broke apart. My nephews. The boys Brielle had used as a bargaining chip. The boys my mother was willing to deploy as a guilt tactic. They weren't weapons. They were just children. Children who drew purple turkeys. Children who, as Aunt May said, just wanted peace. They didn't need their mother's failing boutique. They didn't need their grandmother's toxic, enabling love. They needed a future. They needed stability. They needed out of this cycle. Order 2. The Cooper nephews. Educational trust. I was doing this for them, as much as for me. To protect them. To give them the one thing I never had a safety net that wasn't also a trap. I closed my eyes. The image of the turkey dissolved, and I was back in the Greenhaven market. The smell of artificial pumpkin spice. The beep of the scanner. The sudden, numbing blast of cold from the open freezer. The ice cream. The frozen turkeys. The cloud of mist that made my teeth ache, and Harrison's voice, quiet and gravelly, cutting through the noise. Have you ever thought about freezing the things that are hurting you? I understood. I finally, completely understood. He hadn't been speaking in metaphors. He was a scientist, a pragmatist. He was giving me a diagnosis. He was handing me the prescription. Freezing. I thought about my job at Meridian Biosystems. When a cell culture was contaminated, when a virus or a bacteria began to spread, what did you do? You didn't negotiate with it. You didn't ask it to stop. You didn't offer it 6 more months to see if it would turn a corner. You acted. You isolated the sample. You placed it in the cryofreezer. You dropped the temperature to 190 degrees below zero. You stopped the degradation, instantly, at a cellular level. You didn't do it because you were angry. You didn't do it to be cold or cruel. You did it to save the sample. You did it to stop the disease from spreading. You did it to preserve any healthy tissue that was left. This was the contamination. My family was not just a family. It was an addiction, a closed, toxic loop. Brielle was addicted to the crisis. My mother was addicted to enabling her. My father was addicted to his own passivity. And all of them, were addicted to me. I was their substance. I was the resource they consumed to keep the cycle going. You don't cure an addiction by negotiating. You don't cure it by setting guest rules on your door. You cut off the supply. This wasn't a punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was an intervention. It was the only way to stop the disease. It was the only way to force them to change, to give them a chance to thaw, to become something different. The ice wasn't me. The ice was the habit. I was the one holding the liquid nitrogen. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The air felt clean. My mind was sharp. The agony, the guilt, the lifetime of easy choices. It was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard, beautiful clarity. I slid the glass door open. The room snapped back into focus. The silence of my atrium was shattered by the thick, hateful silence in the conference room. I walked back to the table. They were a tableau, frozen in their own dysfunction. Brielle was still standing, her arms crossed, her face a blotchy mask of red. Pure fury. She looked at me like she hated me. She did. I was her drug dealer, and I was telling her she was cut off. My father, he had not moved. He was just staring at the small pile of white paper scraps on the table, the guest rules I had torn up. He looked like a ghost, a man who had abdicated his life, and now, at the end of it, realized he had nothing. His face was a map of regret. My mother. She looked up at me as I approached. Her eyes were red, her hands clasped on the table. She was not angry. She was not regretful. She was pleading. It was the raw, desperate, animal plea of the addict. Please, one more hit. Don't do this. Give me what I want. Make it easy again. I did not look at them. I looked at my grandfather. Harrison Cooper was sitting exactly as I had left him. His hands were folded on the table. He had not moved. He had not interfered. His expression was perfectly neutral. He was just an observer, a scientist watching his experiment reach its conclusion. He had given me the data. He had given me the tool. The choice, the power, was mine. I stood at the head of the table. I looked down at the dark blue leather folder. Order 1, the freeze. Order 2, the future. I reached out and picked up the heavy black metal pen. It felt impossibly cold in my palm, like a piece of ice from the Greenhaven freezer. Cold, solid, and absolute, but my hand, the hand that closed around it, was not. My hand was steady, it was sure, and it was very, very warm. I did not wait for an answer. I turned from the cold glass of the atrium, my back to the city, and faced the room again. The heavy glass door slid open with a whisper of pressurized air, sealing me back inside with them. The silence in the conference room was thick, suffocating. It was a vacuum, waiting for a sound to shatter it. Brielle was still standing, her arms crossed, her face a blotchy, ugly mask of rage. My mother was a crumpled figure, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking in a silent, pleading agony. My father was just gone. He was a shell, staring at the white scraps of paper on the black table as if they were the ruins of a building. I walked the length of the room. My footsteps were soundless on the dense, expensive carpet. Every eye was on me. I was the meteor, and this was the impact. I reached the head of the table. I did not look at Harrison. I did not look at Elise. I looked at the dark blue leather folder. I reached out and pulled the heavy upholstered chair back from the table. The sound of its legs sliding on the polished floor was a low, heavy groan, a sound of finality. I sat down. I did not slump. I did not collapse. I sat as my grandfather sat. My spine was straight. My hands were steady. I felt the cold, hard wood of the armrests beneath my palms. I placed the blue folder directly in front of me. I opened it. The 2 pages sat, stark white against the dark leather. The heavy black pen rested between them. My family was frozen, waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to save them, to apologize, to break down and become the Hazel they knew. The resource, the utility, the girl who always said yes. I looked up. I did not look at them. I looked at Elise Corcoran. She was standing, perfectly still, her face impassive. She was the law. She was the mechanism. I spoke, and my voice was not my own. It was the voice of the trust. It was the voice of the building. It was cold, and clear, and had no echo. Execute Order 1. I pointed a single, steady finger at the first page. Freeze all discretionary funds, all credit lines, and all emergency disbursements to the adults in my father's branch of this family. The freeze is to be indefinite, pending a full, independent audit and the approval of a verified long-term self-sufficiency plan. The first sound was not a word. It was a noise, a high, thin, animal sound of pure, unadulterated loss. It was my mother. She did not just burst into tears. She shattered. Her head snapped up, her face a ruin, and she let out a wail that seemed to come from the center of the earth. It was the sound of her entire life's purpose managing, enabling, and feeding on this system being obliterated. She collapsed forward onto the table, her hands clutching at the polished wood, her sobs echoing in the dead. Soundproof room. The second sound was violence. "No!" Brielle shrieked, and she lunged forward, slamming both of her palms flat onto the heavy table. The sound was a gunshot. Boom! The pen jumped. The leather folder slid. "You can't. You won't. I will kill you. Hazel, you are a cold-hearted bitch." She was panting, her face inches from mine, her eyes wild with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. She was a cornered animal, ready to tear my throat out. The silent assistant by the door took one half step forward, but Harrison held up a single, gloved hand. The man froze. I did not flinch. I did not lean back. I held her insane, furious gaze. The third sound was silence, the silence of my father. He did not move. He did not look up. He did not defend his wife or his other daughter. He just sat, a broken column, a landmark that had finally given way to erosion. He was the physical manifestation of easier. He was the gray dust of a man who had never made a choice, and now all choices had been taken from him. I waited until Brielle's breathing was a ragged, sobbing gasp. I turned my head, just slightly, back to Elise. I pointed my finger at the second page. Execute Order 2. My voice was just as steady. Open the Cooper Nephews Educational Trust, immediately. Fund it to the maximum allowable charter limits. All payments for tuition, for medical care, for dental, for all defined educational needs, are to be paid directly to the institutions and the providers. No funds will ever pass through a parental account. It is to be protected, walled off, effective immediately. My mother's wail cut off, choked by a new horror. My father let out a single, broken sound, like a board splitting in two. Brielle just stared, her rage replaced by a sudden, hollow-eyed, slack-jawed emptiness. The one weapon she had left her children had just been taken from her, not as a punishment, but as a rescue. They were safe, they were free, and they were, forever, out of her reach. The room was dead. There was nothing left to say. The screaming was over. The begging was over. I looked at my grandfather, Harrison Cooper. His bright blue eyes were on me. He was not smiling. There was no victory in his face. No, "I told you so." No triumph. He just looked at me, and he nodded, a single, slow, fractional nod. It was not a celebration. It was a confirmation. It was a scientist, noting the correct, expected result. The math had been proven. The discipline had been applied. The injustice had been frozen. He had set the test, and I had passed. I turned back to the folder. I picked up the heavy, black metal pen. It was still cold, a rod of solid, polished ice, but my hand was warm, the blood pumping through it, sure and steady. I looked at the line at the bottom of Order 1, the freeze, the wall, the end of the disease. Brielle was watching me, her eyes dead. My mother was watching, her face slick with tears. My father was watching the table. I lowered the pen. "I freeze it." The words dropped into the silence, as heavy and as final as stones. I touched the pen to the paper, the nib, fine and sharp, scratched against the thick, heavy vellum. It was the only sound in the world. The sound of a lock engaging. The sound of a new wall being built. The sound of no. I signed my name, Hazel Cooper. Not a scrawl, a clear, deliberate, disciplined signature. The name I shared with the man at the other end of the table. Then I moved the pen to the second page. Order 2, the future, the rescue, the purple turkey. I signed my name again, Hazel Cooper. I put the pen down. I placed it perfectly, precisely, back in the fold of the blue leather binder. I slid the folder across the polished black lake of the table. Back to Elise Corcoran. Done. Thank you all so much for listening to this story. Please comment below and let us know where you're listening from so we can connect, share our thoughts, and make sure you subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it some extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.